Okay, I'm going to have to explain what the title is. Is the juice worth the squeeze? It's a conversation between me and Steve, who is running the intelligence and rec ops at the moment for Get Your Guide. And the focus around this is what you're putting in to a platform for your sourcing efforts, be it LinkedIn, be it Slack, be it your company careers page, giving you the results that you're expecting. And how do you actually set those expectations for the results? And more importantly, how do you pivot if you don't get the results? Here is what we've got coming up from the conversation.
For me, if I look at sort of top of funnel, there's multiple ways that people can get into there. So we've got referrals, we've got direct sourcing, we've got applications through a number of different channels. Understanding where your highest source of success is usually the best indicator for us on where we should double down. So we're not trying to fix things that are lower performing to be the same as something else. If we identify one or two channels that are working really well for us, it's how do we double down and make sure that we make those even better. I think what I found in my experience is that the more niche a position is, the more likely your success in a group of those people. Because if it's a niche role, they're getting 5-10 messages a day on LinkedIn saying, hey, we've got the best job for you. If every job's the best job, no one is. So a lot of them just don't even engage back. But if they have a group for those specialists and you're respectful on entry into that group and you ask for permission to whoever that admin is to post a job ad or at least mention your company and that you may be hiring. A lot of the time, if you approach it the right way so that they know you're not just going to go in there and spam them with like 1,000 jobs, they're usually okay with it because they want their community to thrive and they want their community to grow.
Steve is genuinely one of those guys who just understands the data usage and how it's so important towards the recruitment effort. But more importantly, that our job is not a data function. We are a people function. So data supports the people element. It doesn't drive the end result. And that is super, super important, especially when you're hiring inside the current market. Data helps us. It doesn't define us. So hopefully you get as much out of this conversation as normal, but thank you so much for sticking around and listening, and please enjoy the episode. Welcome to Tea Time with Talent Acquisition, the podcast aimed at fostering knowledge and sharing stories within the vibrant talent acquisition community. I'm your host, Eden, and for the next hour or so, I'm going to be joined by an experienced talent acquisition leader who is passionate about building and developing teams, skills, and processes. By using talent intelligence and data, he and his team have managed to build sustainable and scaling acquisition strategies across employer branding, sourcing operations, and recruitment. And having been in the industry for the last 15 years, I'm personally very interested to have him join me today to discuss return on investment on sourcing strategies and to really hone in on how we as talent teams can use intelligence for better decision-making and processes around what our core role is, sourcing. So when you're ready, grab your favorite tea or coffee if you prefer, and join me in welcoming today's guest, Steve Collopy, the lead on talent intelligence and rec ops. So thank you so much for joining, Steve.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
By the way, I want to dive into, before we get into the first question, I've got a question of a question, because you're the only talent intelligence and rec ops specialist that I've ever had the chance to speak to. So for those that don't know what that job title is, can you just give me a rough idea or give us a rough idea? What's your job description?
Yeah, it's ever changing, but
always.
I think, talent intelligence, I think, is fairly subjective. Ultimately, I look at it personally as an evolution of sourcing. So if you consider a traditional sourcing role, our ability to seek out and identify talent and engage with them, bolting in a couple of extra steps is what I think talent intelligence is. So how do we map markets to better identify where key talent is? And apart from that, competitor analysis to really understand if we're trying to attract talent from specific companies because we understand that their products or their platforms are more similar to ours, how do we engage with them the right way? So there's a lot of A/B testing on outreach messaging. There's a lot of A/B testing on approach strategies in general. And the rec ops side, talent operations, recruitment operations, really just focused on the optimization of the process that we run as a team to ensure that we deliver the best candidate experience we can do, and of course internally hiring manager experience, to make sure that those people are satisfied that we are doing the role that we're meant to do, and that is to ease, capacity issues and introduce new people to the company that hit the ground running.
So in a nutshell, specialist on the sourcing side, specialist on the data side, specialist on the process side. So we're in good hands. That's why I just want to make sure, because someone's going to listen to a job title and go, I wonder what that is. Because it was the first time when I read it, I was thinking, I wonder what that is. Before we go into the topic of this, and your title is the juice worth the squeeze, which is the most elusive title to what we're going to talk about. But it is still. I wanted to put it there because we spoke about it, and it is right. It's about how do you get the most out of your recruitment effort, your strategy, your sourcing. And before we get into that, you now get the question that everyone gets. So what makes a high-performing recruitment team, in your opinion?
Are you solving your business challenges by acquiring the best talent as fast as possible, in the most humane way as possible, and giving the best experience all round?
So if you can answer yes categorically, you're in a high-performing recruitment team.
Yes.
So sourcing is going to obviously fill into that. The platforms we're going to use are going to fill into that. So when we talk about is the juice worth the squeeze, there's a lot of avenues that I want to discuss with you, and it's understanding. Obviously, use your personal experiences in your teams. Is I want to understand how do we identify platforms that work best for us, when they're working well, why they're working well, and then also when they're not working, and how do we pivot around that? Because I think a lot of the times you ask recruiters, "Hey, what do you use?" "Oh, we've got a career site." "Oh, we use LinkedIn." And if you're in Germany, sometimes you might go onto Zing if you can be bothered, right?
Yeah.
But there's way more out there. There's so much that we could be working on. So what types of platforms have you and your team been using to kind of drive recruitment efforts as of late?
LinkedIn obviously is the monopoly, right? But LinkedIn is a monopoly for a reason. I think they offer a lot of great services, and if you build good relationships with your success managers and your account directors, they really do help you a lot.
You have an account director?
Yes.
Yeah, we don't. Yeah, I had this came up the other day. Actually, it came up on the podcast. LinkedIn, I feel like just forget the little people. We're a smaller company. We have smaller licenses, but we still spend tens of thousands with them. But they kind of just move us from one account manager to another, and then the latest one, as of 6 months ago, just doesn't respond to whatever we request. And we're like, we're trying to buy things from you. Like, we want to buy something. Can you respond to us, please? And no, sorry, just to chime in, just in case someone else is in that same position. You're not alone.
I mean, I guess it's
frustration.
like anywhere, right? Like you have great people and people who maybe are developing, but certainly for us, we've been very consistent. We've been very lucky. So in the last 4 years, we've had the same two people, one sort of success director and one account director. But I mean, we've got an enterprise level account. So I guess the cap is based on what you spend or what products you use.
Yeah.
But yeah, so LinkedIn, we've been experimenting a lot with Slack and Discord channels, because I think those are two very popular sort of messaging platforms that a lot of people are in. You can also form communities on both of those, as I'm sure you know. So using that, working a lot with our employer branding team. So a lot of the content that we post on our LinkedIn community pages, we also post in specific job groups. So if we're targeting Java engineers, finding the more interactive Java groups in both of those platforms, that's brought us a little bit of success. It's been a bit hit and miss, because obviously these people are from all over the world, and sometimes what we're looking for in terms of background and experience doesn't exactly fit. But it's a good place to learn for us as well. It's such as recruiters or as sources, Java is not our specialty. Software development is not our specialty, but understanding new tools or new technologies coming out that we can plug in, it definitely helps the conversations that we can have. And one of the things I think, being talent intelligence, one of the huge benefits that any company has, if you really use that muscle, is that we're the front line. So we speak to so many different people in so many different companies. So our ability to feed back to the company what's actually happening, what are some of the projects people are working on, what are some of the challenges people are trying to solve, it
Hmm.
helps them as well.
Yeah. So LinkedIn, Slack, and Discord. I didn't think about Discord personally. I do use Slack.
Mhm.
I have hit and miss results as well. I built a Slack channel. I think there's like 500-600 people in there. We made a few hires from that.
Yeah.
But that's mostly like around mentoring and coaching. It wasn't really for hiring. It was just as and when things come up. Um, so I do see those ones. I feel like a lot of businesses are moving towards more like community led approach. Do you have any unique ones, or do you have any tools that you might have worked for? And it doesn't have to be for tech. It could be for any type of position that maybe you didn't expect for it to be a platform or to be a source of candidates.
Yes and no. So I think I hear a lot of recruiters talk about CRM, and I think that's quite a subjective meaning. I think different people take away from that different interpretations. But it's been super successful for us in the last year and a little bit. We tried another iteration. So this is something that we've continuously tried to build and maintain. And one of the key differentiators that we worked on was let's build a CRM for engagement, not for hiring. So how do
Mhm.
we engage? When you go through all of this effort and all of this time to source great people, engage with them, whether they've applied, whether you found them, and whether they were passive or active candidates, sometimes the timing's just not right. And that has to be okay because obviously a candidate's urgency and our urgency as a company are very often different things. But
Mhm.
building that CRM for engagement and then working very hard with, our internal teams on a bit more niche content. So maybe not something that is available everywhere to everyone, but if you sign up to the CRM, you get a bit of an inside track. Talking about that, talking about, if there are industry events coming up or meetups or things like that, that has really helped us. And we've been very successful because a lot of the people that were interested in Get Your Guide that for whatever reason perhaps didn't move forward at that initial point have stayed engaged with us, have reapplied for different roles and been successful. So that, you know, for me, it's so important because you put so much time and effort into building these pipelines and talent pools. And if once you make the first hire, you forget about everybody else in there, it's such a loss of productivity. So CRM's been
That
super
comes from
helpful.
external side, right? So you've done a variety of things, and when you was in the external days, you would have had to talent pool
Yeah,
and nurtured that talent pool. And it blows my mind that this is really only becoming a proactive approach for internal teams. Because we've been doing this I mean, I've been doing this 11 years, and it was even done before that. You have
yeah,
a talent pool, you nurture it, so that's when you're ready to go back to market. And that's when you use an external recruiter. So it's really hard to find positions because you don't need us to find a front end developer. If anyone does want me for a front end developer, I'm available. But not
yeah.
so, that's what,
But I think like one of the things that I realized a little while ago, I think, is nurturing talent pools can be done in a lot of different ways.
Mm,
And I think that's the change that's necessary for a lot of companies. It's not just like whether you're an external agency or whether you're an internal team. Hey, how are you? Just checking in. Those kinds of conversations are conversations that a lot of candidates don't have a lot of time for anymore
yeah.
because of that availability of resource for job platforms where they can apply for anything whenever they want to, as soon as they're on the market. I think that nurturing and maintenance of a talent pool needs to be automated as much as you can, but it needs to add a sense of value that they
Mhm.
wouldn't get without being a part of it. So just the check-in of, hey, how are you? If you've had a long relationship, how's the family or something like that.
Yeah.
It's obviously the personal touch, which you can do with a select few candidates, but definitely not with all of them. So having that hook of content or engaging narrative is definitely worth keeping in touch with. And apart from anything else, I think as a candidate, it just shows that you care so much more about them as not just a placement, not just a hire. It's like, I value what you do and how you do it, and I want to be involved in that process.
Like, is that content led engagement?
Yeah.
One thing, and as you're saying, I'm just thinking what we do. So at the beginning of, so at the end of December, like the last couple of weeks of December, when everyone starts to switch off a little bit, anyone that, we've been keeping in touch with, actually, this is both for candidates and clients, would always do like an end of year message, just saying, like, these are the observations that we've seen. This is what we're expecting over the first quarter. If you're interested in having a deeper chat, let's have a conversation that way. Obviously, you are right. Those that we have better relationships with, you'll have a more personable approach. But then coming into January, like for the last, as long as I can remember, my January is back to back, call after call after call for weeks and weeks and weeks, because people are just curious about knowledge. And then we also run the same thing in the summer. So once the summer holidays are finished, this is what we've seen over the last 6 months, and it keeps that engagement going. And then when we talk about GDPR and the legal side of it, you do it every 6 months, they opt back in, and you can then, so they're kind of what works with us, but we use the same tactic of content. It's making sure that there's something valuable to bring to them, not just, hey, I'm checking in. Obviously, you can do that with some people, but the vast majority, they're just going to be like, no, not interested. So let's stick on these various tools. So we've got LinkedIn, Slack, Discord, and the CRM, right? How do you understand where the best talent is actually coming from? And then how does that shape the activities that you and your team are actually doing?
Conversion rates for me is the magic sauce. You spend a lot of time, so if there's a way that you can calculate how much time or how much effort goes into what you're doing on these different platforms, you would measure the results of that by conversion. So if I outreach to 100 people on LinkedIn, how many of those people respond to me in total? Mm-hmm. How many of those responses are positive in the sense that they really want to join a process, that they're engaged and they're actually going to go through our hiring team? And what is the success then throughout the rest of that process? So for me, if I look at sort of top of funnel, there's multiple ways that people can get into there. So we've got referrals, we've got direct sourcing, we've got applications through a number of different channels. Understanding where your highest source of success is usually the best indicator for us on where we should double down. So we're not trying to fix things that are lower performing to be the same as something else. If we identify one or two channels that are working really well for us, it's how do we double down and make sure that we make those even better? So are there things that we can do to improve how easy it is for someone to send through an application? Is that application experience as optimal as it can be? And then on the outside of the desk is how quickly are we able to respond to these applications? Because as a candidate, of course, there's nothing worse than sending out an application and 3 weeks go by and you haven't heard anything back. So making sure that, you have those SLAs in place internally, that you are actioning, you can do it by source. I think referrals is probably one that everyone understands. If you have a company of people that are making referrals, you want to action those referrals as quickly as you can, because these are people that other people know and trust. So they've put their name on the line to say, hey, I work at a great company, come and join me. And then they don't hear back for 2 weeks. It's a horrible experience.
Yeah. So you're not putting equal weight towards every source. So again, say you have a full stack position. We're not saying to your team, all right, you even go spend a day on LinkedIn, and then maybe I'm partnered with somebody else. Let's call Steve for argument's sake, because you're there. Steve, you're going to go spend the equal amount of time on Discord, and then let's see how the funnel goes in. But you might spend 80% of your time on LinkedIn, 20% of your time on Discord.
Yeah.
So so we're focusing on where are we more likely to get the best talent, and we're basing that on past data that we've selected or that we've seen. Does it change on positions then? So do you find, and I'm saying LinkedIn obviously is probably the source that majority of people use, and mostly for most roles, but do you find that you will come across a role like maybe an account manager or a sales leader, where actually LinkedIn isn't the best source? It might be insert whatever tool you want to here, and then you'll kind of switch it depending on that.
Yeah. I think what I found in my experience is that the more niche a position is, the more likely your success in a group of those people. Because if it's a niche role, they're getting 5, 10 messages a day on LinkedIn saying, hey, we've got the best job for you. If every job's the best job, no one is.
Yeah.
So a lot of them just don't even engage back.
Yeah.
But if they have a group for those specialists and you're respectful on entry into that group and you ask for permission to whoever that admin is to post a job ad or at least mention your company and that you may be hiring. A lot of the time, if you approach it the right way so that they know you're not just going to go in there and spam them with like 1,000 jobs,
Yeah.
they're usually okay with it because they want their community to thrive and they want their community to grow. So doing that with niche roles, that has to be a slightly more proactive approach in finding the right groups and the right niches. Whereas if it is a more mainstream, I hope I don't offend anyone by saying that, but if it's a more mainstream role like a full stack engineer, obviously different companies, different tech stacks, different ways of doing that, but they are generally quite easy to find on LinkedIn, but difficult to engage. And that's one of the things that, I think any TA team will always struggle with. Our problem is not finding talent. Our problem is engaging that talent to the point that they want to now have conversations with us. So what do we have to do as a company to ensure that our outreach is attractive enough to catch their attention, that they will engage back and say, hey, I'm not really looking, but what you're offering sounds cool. Let's chat.
Do you think on the internal side you have a much more difficult task than I do on the external side when it comes to engaging with talent? Because I feel like you get one opportunity. If a company doesn't want to work for your company,
Yeah.
you've lost them. Whereas at least I can say, hey, insert company, get your guide. No. Okay, well,
Yeah.
let's have an open chat. Let's see. And then even when you're on a call with them, you can still then potentially bring up the conversation. And I've definitely had it and hired off the back of it. It was like, trust me, what you're seeing isn't the full story. You've got to believe me. Who's responsible for doing the tracking element? Is that down to the recruiter who's running that role to come to you as your leader and say, look, this is what I'm seeing, this is what I think we should be doing? Or is it down to you as the leader to say to your recruitment team, this is what we've seen, go and do it?
In an ideal world, I'd like to say it's a shared responsibility. If I think it depends on the level of person you're dealing with as well to a certain degree, but as a lead, you should definitely know where your most successful sources are. If you're leading a team, you want to ensure that you're able to direct their attention and direct what they are doing in the right places. But then as a recruiter or as a sourcer, I would hope that you would be as interested in where you're finding success as much as possible, because then you can say, look, I've got capacity because these sources aren't working. I'm done with that source. So if there's anything else I can do, let's do it. And I think a lot of those sources, you mentioned, and I didn't want to interrupt you, but when we talk about like Slack and Discord, that to me is not really sourcing, because once I've sourced the groups, it's passive because I put in the content, I advertise the job, and then it's just another avenue for them to find our career page. The way we've done it anyway is that we have what I think are great graphics to catch people's attention. And if they click that link, it takes them to our careers page. That obviously gives them a lot more information because that's where we have our blog site. That's where we have a lot of information about the company. And if they are still interested, then they hit apply through there. But once we've posted that content, at least for, 48 to 72 hours, we don't do anything else in that group unless we're getting tagged with questions and things like that. Obviously, we respond as quickly as we can. But our active sourcing would be either X-ray, if we're trying to find people in Stack Overflow or GitHub or something like that, we would X-ray that through a couple of different browser extensions. And if not that, then direct sourcing in LinkedIn and building talent pools that way.
See, I use Slack and Discord differently then. So
Yeah.
not necessarily Discord, actually. That's a lie. I've done it once and I didn't like the interface, so I cannot get out. I stuck on Slack. So I join the Slack channels, do posts. Then I cross-reference, if it's a niche role, I cross-reference LinkedIn or GitHub or whatever I can find from them to the Slack channel. And if they're in Slack, I can see they're quite active, I message them on that. So I'll do proactive outreach on the Slack channel instead of just posting it. If I feel I can get them quicker there. If they're super active on LinkedIn, I'll do that there. So that's really, I think I'm in quite a lot of like leadership, C-level Slack channels, and it's a really good way to find like exec, director, C-suite roles because they are super responsive on Slack and super unresponsive on LinkedIn because they get bombarded on that. And if you're in a Slack channel dedicated for their niche, they're like, okay, let's speak. So that's always like my first port of call for those sorts of roles.
I think that's a key point that you're mentioning. It's hugely important based on the audience that you're trying to engage with, and that the different approaches that you may take for different audiences has to accommodate their style or their needs. Right? We might be the best company in the world with the best job opportunity ever, but if we can't let people know about that the right way that they listen to, and you can kind of boil that all the way back to kind of like, how do you interview active listening? If all I'm doing is waiting to respond and tell you something and I'm not listening to what you're actually saying to me, then we're never going to see eye to eye. So.
Yeah. I think it's a lot easier, and hopefully you agree, let's see. It's a lot easier to set the targets around something like LinkedIn. Because LinkedIn, especially on Recruiter, you've got the dashboard, you've got the analytics, and I'm not a LinkedIn fanboy by any chance, but let's just say it's good, right? Their data analytics talk is good. See my response rate, I can see my percentage of unopened, I can see how many emails my team have sent, I can really drill down as a leader to say what's happening here. Slack you can't, other tools you can't. So how do you actually set those targets that you are creating to your team? So you mentioned like you're going to spend, and again my example was LinkedIn 80% of the time, Slack 20%, whatever. How do you set appropriate targets where your recruiters feel I can go and achieve that, or that's a little bit of a stretch, but I'm going to go and try and get that, opposed to thinking, bloody hell, Steve, like you're not on the tools, you don't know what it's like at the moment. Because again, you might be, I don't know, you tell me, but I personally felt that from the class leader, thinking you're not in the trenches with us, you don't understand that tool does not produce what you think it's going to produce.
Yeah.
How do you combat that?
Yeah, so I like reverse engineering. So looking at, if it's a role that we've hired before, if I go from hire backwards to top of funnel, how many people did I need at that top of funnel through each stage of the process that equaled that one hire, right?
Yep.
And if I can do that, then I can set appropriate targets because I can estimate based on previous data how many applications should we get once we post this role over X amount of time. If I want to then speed that up and say, I can't wait 2 weeks for these applications to come in to naturally and organically fill that role, I need to be a little bit more proactive, then I can use our general sourcing metrics and say, if we've been able to maintain a 35% positive response rate to all of our outreach messages, how many people, if I want to say put 10 people into a process, how many people do I need to message based on that 35 response rate to get that in, right? And once you do the math that way, obviously, if you're a full-time sourcer, you have a little bit more time to really build that strategy out. Obviously, if it's a role that we've done before, we already have a strategy that we know will have worked in some way. Perhaps there's ways we can optimize based on new learnings, but we know what the numbers are and we know how much outreach we have to do to get X many people into the process, and then rely on the process that we are confident in to see them through the rest of that process into a hire. That will change if you're doing, bulk hiring. Of course, if you're hiring 5, 6, 10 engineers at the same time, then that's just an evergreen process. I just want to source as many high quality, great people as possible and get them into that process as quickly as I can. But using the data, I also need to understand, based on talent intelligence, based on who I'm speaking to, where are these people coming from and where do I have the highest likelihood of success that the time I'm spending, if I'm spending 6 hours a day sourcing, to spend 2 hours a day customizing the outreach messages and making sure that I'm not just spam botting a bunch of people, that 8 hours is very expensive, especially if it's more than one person doing it. So doing that and then looking at your previous data, are we getting the best candidates within Europe? external to Europe? If it's external to Europe, where? And what are the accommodations that we have to make? Are there cultural accommodations? Is it a tonality? Is it a style of communication? What do we have to change that we ensure the highest level of success? But that all comes down to understanding what your key conversion rates are in your business, within your hiring teams, because your tech hiring conversion rates are probably going to be different to your marketing conversion rates for different reasons. But we have to be accountable to knowing what they are, where do we normally see bottlenecks or challenges, and how can we accommodate that through being a little bit smarter on how we advertise roles, when we advertise roles, to get that organic application coming in. Where do we use our employer branding to the best of our ability to ensure that more people know about us? And this is something that I think a lot of companies overlook sometimes, is your employer branding is not just to target people and get them to apply when they see that initial thing. Because a lot of people see things and never take any action, but then if a week later they get an outreach message from someone on my team that says, hey, have you ever heard about Get Your Guide? Well, actually, yeah, I have.
Yeah.
So that makes things a lot easier if you have a great employer branding team, whether it's driving immediate applications or future knowledge of the company, that when you do that outreach, you're likely to be more successful. Expanding your reach is always super important. So whether that's just on just on sourcing, or whether you're attending events and being a representative of your company, of your team, getting your name out there helps your sourcing so much further down the line, because people remember names, and people remember maybe not your name exactly, but they'll remember your logo, or they'll remember your colors or something like that. And that association it eases everything, and it just increases your conversion rates all the way through.
On that topic, I want to go back 2 seconds. But on that topic, I cannot stress that enough. Like even like doing this podcast, right? Since doing this, it is way more easier for me to go and talk to talent acquisition specialists in person, especially mostly in Berlin. This is where most of our listeners sit. But even I attend events in London, and they're like, "Oh, you work at Peritus," because they recognise Tea Time to Peritus, and they might not know my name. That's totally fine. Even I do say it at the beginning of every episode now. Thanks, everyone. But it's that association. You're absolutely right, and it breaks down any perceived barrier. There's a lady called Andrea. She works at Contentful, and she helped me with a blog the other week. And she brought it up. She was like, "I've never met you." Like, just heard to me. She was like, "I've never met you, but I've seen your name, and I feel like we're best friends now. And like we've now spoken 4 or 5 times." And she was like, "Now when you message me, it's like, oh, it's Eden." And it's like, but it's because of the blog. It's because of the Slack channels that I'm in, and it's eventually you just you get out there. And it works the same way with the employer branding. It's, the more Get Your Guide is there, the more they're emailing me events, the more I might see them on LinkedIn, the more outreach is not now. Eventually something's going to click and go, okay, I'll speak to Steve. Yeah, let's nail that time. I want to backtrack, sorry, because you spilled a lot just then, which was around your reverse engineering, and then you spoke about bottlenecks. So you're taking a particular role, as long as it's not a bulk hire, shall we say, but you're reverse engineering every specific role that's come into your team. If you've got some past experience, you're using that as your starting point, and then maybe utilizing what's happening in the market right now to adjust what your expectations are, but you're using past to help for the future. Fine. If you have no past experience hiring that position, and no one in the team has, and I actually use the example of ML Ops at the moment. You might have it in your team, I don't know, but I work with a lot of really small seed companies who they want it, they like the idea of it, they know what it is to some degree, but they have no idea how to hire for it. And it's like trying to teach them, look, that role it's like what DevOps was 8-9 years ago. It's like people want it, but hardly anyone's doing it. So the talent pool is like real good MLOps people in Berlin, 30 people, right? So you've got to be prepared to either pay, go outside of Berlin, and there's all these sorts of things that you coach them on, but that's because I've hired it. Teams obviously don't use me to hire them. So let's say they don't. What happens then? How do you start that process?
Exactly like you've just mentioned, right? And that is expectations management. When you kick off that role, having a team of people within talent acquisition that understand that we cannot just find purple squirrels, right? They you want to hire X position, it's vital to your team or vital to the org. That's fine. And we're going to do everything we can to facilitate that. But you have to work with us. So for us, before we would even begin that process at kickoff or an induction meeting, whatever you might call it, we would go prepared with some kind of market mapping. How many roles or how many people do that role in our immediate environment, in a broader European climate, and then rest of world? Can we get any information? Who are our top competitors for this talent? If we have that, how do we compete in terms of salary? Just managing those expectations with your hiring manager that may have never done it but knows they need it, it immediately helps us manage those expectations. And, for us, if we can share more knowledge, if we can do a couple of introduction calls and speak to some of these people, pitch them what we're offering, is immediately share that feedback as well. This is what people in that role, in this market, are feeling about what you'd want done or what this job is. And that way, we then would use whatever our standard process or standard template is for recruiting, ensuring that we are as optimal as we can be for time and quality. Make sure that everyone in that process is very well briefed if they have never hired that particular role before. Perhaps they're experienced interviewers, but just not for that. Or maybe they're first-time interviewers. So how do we enable them? How do they know what are the best questions to ask? And are we sure that every person in that process has unique questions and is trying to find out something specific? And it's not just going to turn into a coffee chat of, hey, tell me a bit about you. Because there's nothing worse, especially if you're a candidate that's high in demand, to speak to a company that doesn't really question what you're doing, right? It doesn't give you that opportunity to explain what you're looking for.
So go back to the bottleneck part, if that's okay, because I think that's also really pinpoint, because sometimes what works doesn't always work forever. And take LinkedIn, right? I think now we're in a very fortunate position. It's a very candidate-rich market. Obviously, what's happening is a shit situation for candidates. Let's say how it is. Fortunate for companies. You got pick. It will flip. It will go back to what it was before, where you are struggling. I mean, it's. I'm already seeing it with certain roles already. It's going to come. So when a platform is performing well and then it's now underperforming, how are you identifying those bottlenecks? And I feel like there's a perception of what the problem is, and then there's the problem that it really is. So how do you understand what the actual root cause of that problem is?
Volume and quality. Is the volume the same but the quality is reduced, or is the volume less and the quality remained the same? So if it's a volume issue, we need to find out where these people have gone, because they haven't just disappeared. They've just gone somewhere else. And we need to understand why and where they are so that we can engage with them over there. If it's a quality issue, is it just that there's a lot more people that are perhaps not as experienced? So we have to look a little bit harder. Perhaps we have to change our qualifying criteria. Is it years of experience? Is it education? Is it experience of particular projects? But understanding first whether it's volume or quality, that's our key starting point, because we would take a slightly different approach to whichever one of those things it is. And then it's just about constant measurement. So if we make these adjustments, has that changed our outcome? Yes, it has. Perfect. Can we do a little bit more to increase the outcome? Yes, we can. Well, let's do it. Or if we make these changes and nothing changes, then we need to go back to point one. We still haven't solved the problem. Is it volume? Is it quality? No, it's none of those things. Is it our brand name? Is it what we're offering? Is it the job? Is it the pay? Let's get on the phone. Let's speak to some people and understand the sentiment. And then depending on what that is, do we need to go and have a chat with the hiring team about what they're actually asking for? Or do we have to have a chat with our rewards and compensation team and see whether we can get a re-benchmark on a salary set? Or maybe it's a combination of all of that. And then it's, let's get a few people in a room at the same time with the problem statement, what our findings are, and let's have one discussion and get it fixed.
And what's the frequency of doing this review?
For us, we benchmark salaries every year. So we have an amazing team who do that, and I'm sure it's going to give them premature gray hair, but they are exceptionally good at what they do. For market and sort of talent market availability or talent market sentiment, depending on the roles. If we're hiring one MLOps person a year, then we would do it every single time we do a kickoff. Even if we have the previous data, I mean, things change in a month in TA, right? So understanding the frequency with which we look for these people, but it's also not something that has to happen in exclusive stages. You're going to learn as you do it, and you're going to gain information as you do it. So how do we share that the best way with which audience? And understanding which audience we need to share market information with about what in the market is a key part of understanding our talent intelligence in as much as we can. So does this information need to be shared with our C-level because they are pushing for this team, for this product launch or whatever it is? They need to be aware of where potential delays, bottlenecks, or challenges are going to be, but they probably don't need that in as much detail as the person responsible for making the hire.
Yeah.
So
there's elements you need to share, to get your point across, but not wasting people's time with it. But I love the fact that how you're talking, it's always about going into these conversations with the as much knowledge as you can as a recruiter, because I firmly believe that's where a lot of people go wrong in searches, external and internal. You kind of just go and you take a requirement, you go on. Whereas I see our jobs as we are knowledge holders, knowledge storers. That's what we do. We know everything as much as we can about the markets we're in, the candidates we work with, the hiring managers, and the teams that we support. And then all three of those come together into 1, 2, 3 person teams, whatever. And that's where hires are being made. It's not the salary. This is my own opinion. It's not the salary. It's not the benefits. It's not the project personally. It's the knowledge that you have around everything that makes the hiring process a success or not. Because if you don't understand what someone's triggers are, they might not care about the salary. They might care about something completely different. But you don't know to sell on that without knowing what the trigger is to begin with.
Absolutely. And that for me is a key point that I've seen change definitely over the last few years, because everyone's a data user, right? Like everyone's about data, show me more data.
Yeah, people.
There's data everywhere about everything, but we're a people function. We have to be about people. It's about communication. It's about understanding. So we can use data to inform how we do things, but it should never decide what we do. We can use the data to understand a market, to then investigate it. But, it's a prioritization tool, not a black and white, data says this, it's not worth it, don't even try. No. Is your data set correct? Did you use the right variables? Could you have changed something and done it a little bit differently? So you have to have that people element. We're not experts in whatever we're recruiting, unless we're recruiting recruiters. We're not experts in that field, but we are hopefully experts in how we engage with those people, how we begin those conversations, and how we make those introductions. That's where we're specialists. And that's where we add so much value to any organization, whether you're internal, external. If you're a good recruiter or a good sourcer, your ability to make the best introductions in the shortest time possible, that's your magic sauce. That's where you play.
It's what makes a successful recruitment team, linking back to your beginning part. I want to finish off on one final point, which is around the utilization of levers, which is what you referred to it as. And it kind of comes onto an element that's maybe an underperforming resource. So when something is underperforming, what are the types of things or the types of levers organizations or talent teams can deploy or do to hopefully increase the return on investment from that platform before you call it, a complete rehaul?
Yeah. And that's something I think that every team and every organization is going to face at some point. Obviously, understanding, right? Use your data. You have to. It all comes down to your conversion rates. If you see your conversion rates dropping, is it really the platform, or is it how we're using the platform? right? Because sometimes platforms change, and yeah, there's nothing you can do about the change that they've made. They believe it's best for their product and what they want to do, and maybe that just doesn't fit your use case anymore, in which case maybe you just have to move on. But in other cases, maybe that's not so easy because you have a contract or you have some kind of subscription base to it. You need to understand, and that's where communicating with their product team or at least with their CSMs to explain to them, look, you've made these changes, that's a huge problem for us, what can we do about it? Or you just get absolutely brutal. You guys have changed too much for us to keep using you. We need to negotiate an exit strategy here. Get rid of that platform. Don't spend time on things that don't work. And the only way you're understanding whether it's working or not working is, are you getting what you need for your recruiting processes, for candidate, for volume, top of funnel, end of funnel, whatever stage it is that you're using that tool for? If it's no longer fit for purpose, investing time to try and fix things is often a double productivity loss, right? Because you spend all that time trying to fix it. If that's unsuccessful, you're then spending more productivity time onboarding something new. So you've lost double time. Whereas if you can say, like, categorically, if you're in a position where your data is standardized and consistent and accurate, and you say, this is no longer working, we know why, so we're just going to cut that out, let's bring on this new thing, it's just a lot more clean and it's a lot easier. But you have to understand those variables of, have we changed how we use it? Have they changed how they operate? Is it a mix of both? Or is it the market, right? Maybe they haven't changed and you haven't changed, but the market has shifted. So if the market shifted, is it the tool's fault? No. But can we still use that tool in the new market dynamic? Yeah. But I think it's one of those things.
That's the quality element again, right? Isn't it?
How long is a piece of string?
Yeah, true. I think you're just saying that's the element of, if the market is changing, is that the quality that we're seeing, or is it the output? And I guess all of this is stemming to reflection, right? As a leader of a talent team or as an individual in a talent team, reflecting back on, okay, what have I been doing? What's my conversion rate? Where is the successes coming from? We always look at that part as well. Every hire we make, where did it stem from? Every business that we brought on, where did it stem from? What was the actual initial part that said engagement?
Yeah.
Because then that's where you because they might engage with you on LinkedIn, but if it's started on that CRM, that's the true element. That's the starting point. That's the bit that the CRM gets accredited, not LinkedIn. I think that's sometimes the other part is that and I've been at fault, you kind of track where's the part where they've said yes to me, not where's the part that they've started to engage with us. And LinkedIn's really good in the sense of you can actually see when people connect back to you. You can see when people follow your company. On your CRM, you probably have similar data where they've started to engage with you to begin with, and you can really pinpoint the initial point. But that helps really identify where the actual source is, the root source, not the perceived source.
Yes.
Steve, you've got clearly a lot of knowledge around this, so thank you so much for sharing. And I really do hope that someone listening gets just as much out of this. But if someone wants to pick this up, get to know you a bit better, pick your brain a bit more, where's the best place that they can find you?
LinkedIn.
Someday, someone's going to say something other than LinkedIn, and but I mean, it's obviously what we all go on. But I'll pop your LinkedIn then on the footnotes of this. But I really appreciate it. Genuinely, I think the topic of how data can best be used within recruitment is absolutely fundamental. But I think you've hit the nail on the head. It's a people function, so data drives, how we can work, but it shouldn't drive the actual every element of what we're working on. But thank you so much for joining.
Thank you, Eden. Thank you very much. I love the podcast. I listen to all the other episodes as well. So very, very excited.
I didn't even pay him to say that, everyone.
No,
pay him to that.
That's all me. But I do look forward to hopefully having my name amongst some of the other amazing guests that you've had on, and the conversations that have happened. So thank you very much.
I appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you so much.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.